How late did you go?
I don't know why.
How's the birthday done so far?
No idea.
Great. Well, it's even going to be better when we have this wonderful vote in a few minutes. What a way to celebrate a birthday than with a wish coming true that we could work together to get the job done for the American people. I was just listening to the speaker's speech on the floor, and it was very encouraging to hear. Since 2003, Congress has spent nearly $170 billion in short-term SGR patches. People don't understand those short-term patches are more expensive than addressing the issue in a macro way. We're transferring Medicare away from a volume-based system toward one that rewards value. This is really important. This is what the Affordable Care Act was all about. Value, not volume. Performance, not procedures. Quality, not quantity of procedures. And again, it makes people healthier. That's the most important thing. But it also lowers cost. And because the Affordable Care Act and the lowering of the increase of cost of health care, we're able to afford this legislation. And of course, we're happy about Children's Health Insurance Program. We always want more, but we're pleased to extend it for 2 more years, expand the community health centers funding. I think you know some of the particulars of the bill, but it's really a good bill. It's going to have a good, strong vote, and it's going to be very soon. So I'll be brief in my comments. This has been a really interesting week. Yesterday, we heard a magnificent presentation from the president of Afghanistan. So remarkable. Hopefully, he gave us hope, and hopefully we can work together to help Afghanistan achieve its goals. What was especially pleasing to so many of us who've worked on this issue for a very long time, well, you know how long, since the start, it was actually a very long time. I, in the 1979 and 80, was outside the Soviet then, consulate carrying flags, Soviets out of Afghanistan. Our Soviet embassy has been the site of many First Amendment demonstrations over time, and at that time it was, as you know, a very big concern to the American people that the Soviets had invaded. But in any event, since 9/11 especially, our official responsibilities toward U.S.-Afghan policy. But what we loved was about a third of his speech was about women in Afghanistan. And as we say here, when women succeed, America succeeds. It was clear that the president believes that when women succeed, Afghanistan succeeds. And that's common ground for us to work together. And while we come together and salute the bipartisanship that went in the SGR, this week we also had a big division, and that was on the budget. The Republican budget has many reasons to oppose it. It's a terrible budget in many respects. But what's most bothersome to me is what it does to our young people. It is so damaging because it undermines the magnificent potential of young people in our country. It ends higher education tax credit, cuts student loan program, increasing their cost, increases student loan debt, freezes maximum Pell Grant. Imagine the Pell Grant for those kids who are right on the margin as to whether they can go to school or not, freezes Pell Grant funding for 10 years. It's a big cut. Eliminating $89 billion for Pell Grant increases that Congress has already enacted and paid for. And overall cuts student loan aid by more than $220 billion. The GOP budget overall cuts current policy support for student loan aids by more than, again, $220 billion over 10 years. Empowering students to finance their student loan at lower rates is a very empowering initiative, and that's what we announced here. Some of you were here with Mr. Courtney introducing legislation, the Bank on Student Emergency Loan Refinancing Bill. It addresses the crisis of student loan debt weighing on the lives right now of so many entrepreneurial young Americans. And that student loan, we want entrepreneurship, we want to encourage it, but having the anvil of student loan weigh you down is one barrier to young people following their passion and their pursuits, even if that means starting a small business, even that means starting a small family. It's just not a good thing for the dynamic of a society and an economy. And that, again, I could talk all day, and you probably think I will, about what's wrong with the Republican budget. But that one is so demoralizing. I'm very proud of the work of Chris Van Hollen, as our ranking member on the Budget Committee, for the contrast that he has made in terms of jobs. 2.9 million jobs will be lost because of the cuts in the Republican budget. And these are cuts in investments. These are cuts in investment. And I'll just close this point by saying nothing brings more money to the Treasury than the education of the American people. Early childhood, K through 12, higher ed, post-grad, lifetime learning. That's where the revenue comes in to the public treasure, enabling us in turn to provide the services that we need to grow our economy. Nothing does more for innovation than the education of the American people. Innovation begins in the classroom. So if you want to reduce the deficit, educate. If you want to innovate, educate. If you want to have a society where people can pursue their passion and their aspirations, educate. When we eliminate the disparity in education, we will go a long way to eliminating the disparity in opportunity. Opportunity, that's what America is all about. With that, I'd be pleased to take any questions before the vote.
On SGR, you've got an unusual situation where you and the Democratic leader in the Senate are not together necessarily on an issue you're usually together on, abortion and health care. How do you explain that, and what do you expect to happen on that side?
Well, I hope that we have a big, strong vote here today, and that will encourage the Senate to take up the bill as soon as possible so that our work will be done before the deadline, March 31st. We really don't have a difference of opinion. We would like to get rid of the Hyde Amendment, but the Hyde Amendment has been part of community health centers legislation since 1979, since Hyde Amendment existed. But the difference is not necessarily the language only, it's the vehicle it's on. And what happened in the Senate is they put that language on a vehicle which codified Hyde. Over here, we just called back to language that is in the Affordable Care Act, that is in our appropriations bills every year. As soon as we can get enough votes to get rid of the Hyde language each year, that would be a good thing. Just to go back in history, since it's my birthday, and I went back to 1980 with Afghanistan, I'll go back to 1980 again. I was in Italy representing President Carter as part of, I was chair of the California Democratic Party. I really wasn't a senior person, but Mario Cuomo, Geraldine Ferraro, Mario Biaggi, Silvio Conte, that kind of level of members of Congress who were part of this trip I was invited to be on. And we went there at the invitation of the president to bring this sympathy of the American people at the time of the Italian earthquake. And when we were in the restaurant in the hotel in Rome, somebody said, "This is 1980. There's Henry Hyde over there at the bar." And for me, in 1980, this Hyde Amendment came in 79, was like, oh my goodness, how can we be in the same place? How can we be in the same place? So my concern about the Hyde Amendment goes back a very long way. And then I'd see people talking to him, and I thought, well, I guess that's the way it is. They're talking to him, and of course we served together, and he had other things to recommend him. But to me, it was very scary to see Henry Hyde there so soon after he had put forth the Hyde Amendment. So I understand the concerns that people have about it. I also know that it has been voted on every year, just about every year since 1979. There's nothing new in this legislation about it. Not to be confused with what happened on the Senate side, which was language attached in a way that would codify, make it law, and that is something we're all against. So I have a great working relationship with the Democratic leader. I think he's a reflection of his caucus, and hopefully, having said all that everyone has said, we'll have a good, strong vote over there today. I don't know if it'll be today, maybe tomorrow.
On that point, Madam, were you worried at all that your bill that you crafted with John Boehner could fall victim to Harry Reid and the Democratic Senate? I mean, that would have been some bad PR. Were you worried about that at all?
No, the Congress works its will. We were working our will in the House. We had carefully, you probably didn't hear my statement on the floor because you were probably gathering to be here on time, but I was just saying what a tribute this was to the staff of the Congressional Budget Office, the staff of Legislative Counsel, the staff of HMS, CMS, the staff of HHS, the staff of Democrats and Republicans, the Speaker's office, our office, the Energy and Commerce Committee, the Ways and Means Committee. This was a very densely worked upon project, and it took a lot of work, and every time somebody would change a word, the CBO would have to rescore, Leg Counsel would have to weigh in. So this was a very professional, that when I say that I meant very objective, clear-cut, what can we do to remove this fight every year from the calendar in a way that is transformative, that will lower cost and for Medicare, but also continue to serve even the lowest income seniors in our country in a way that they have access to their doctors, and at the same time help low-income children with the SCHIP initiative, as well as community health centers, and the list goes on of some other good things that are in there. I never had any doubt about what it would mean in the House. What happens in the Senate, well, that's another body.
Madam Leader, we understand that former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. is being released today and may be coming back to Washington, maybe to spend the rest of his time in perhaps the halfway house. That's not completely clear. Have you had any contact with him? Did you visit with him at all in Selma? He was incarcerated in Alabama.
Some members did. I saw his father last week at an event, and he told me that his release was imminent. I wish his family well. I pray for them, and hope that the beautiful children, lovely children, will be able to thrive now that their father is home.
We saw sort of two different examples of fiscal matters being handled in the House this week. A divided Republican Party that required some maneuvering to get the budget passed. This deal on SGR with you and Boehner. What do you think this says about the appropriations process? Is it going to be a long, drawn-out fight? Do you think that you see Speaker Boehner coming to you and working with you to get your members on board for appropriations bills?
Well, let's harken back to last year. Last year, in December, when we had the omnibus, there were 11 bills that went through that had been crafted in a bipartisan way, and there was really not much question about them. It was just the 12th bill, the Homeland Security bill, that created the problem because of the insistence of many in the Republican caucus that they were going to shut down government in terms of Homeland Security because of their disagreement with the president on his executive orders on immigration. They were wrong. That's done. We worked together in a bipartisan way to get that done, as you know, about 2 weeks ago. So what has just transpired in this past year is, I don't want to say a model, because I hope we don't have an omnibus, but I hope that we could pass the bills individually. But in any case, a reflection of the fact that there was bipartisan agreement, hard work done on these bills by the, now I'm an appropriator, and Stenny's an appropriator, Mr. Clyburn's an appropriator. So we understand that on that committee, there really is an attitude of bipartisanship. We know what our responsibility is. We see the urgency of the needs of the American people. How do we get this done? The only time there become problems are when riders enter the picture that aren't appropriations but are policy matters that disrupt. And that's really what happened on something similar to that happened on the Homeland Security. So I have reason to think by recent past performance that as long as we keep the riders out of the picture on appropriations, members can come together. One wrinkle of it will be, though, this is a very, very damaging budget that the Republicans have passed. And there has to be, the appropriators have to have some say in what the allocation is and what the allocations are in each individual appropriations bill. More on the subject than you want to know because I'm an appropriator. Yes, sir. One more.
Back to
Two
the
more.
SGR for a second. How frequently have you been in discussions with Leader Reid, and is there any indication that he and the Senate Democrats who have been critical of the bill are softening that position and can pass something this week?
I probably won't answer that question. I talked to Harry Reid quite a bit about a variety of subjects, and in the course of a conversation on one subject, maybe another subject will come into it. And by the way, this is what we're doing on this or that. Not by the way, and a new development has occurred or something. But I speak to him quite regularly and have great admiration for him. And I just have confidence that the quality of what we have done, what has been crafted in the House, is really a good bipartisan initiative, and hopefully that will, in the equities that have to be weighed over there, that they will come down in support of it. Yes, sir.
Are you concerned that, given the uncertainty of whether the Senate can act this week on that bill, given the fatigue that might set in because of vote-a-rama, that they will not do it? Are you sorry that there's not going to be a patch being offered here?
Well, when you say the vote-a-rama, you mean on the budget?
In the Senate, right?
Yeah, on the budget. Well, this is not a. This bill shouldn't take a long time to take up. So again, without going into what I think the various options are on the Senate side, I think it's possible for us to be able to get this done this week. You hear various versions of the story, but it's no need for me to give them any currency. You just have to speak to Senator McConnell to get the answer.
I mean, you think that's unfortunate that the House is not doing one?
No, we're confident. This is a good product. I believe that this will move. Not because anybody's told me it will, but just because of the quality of the package, how well crafted it is. And there are many things in here that I haven't mentioned that have support in the Senate as well. Yes, sir. And congratulations to you for your, not only your length of service, but the quality of your service.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I hope you're able to attend a little thing we're going to have later.
I'm looking forward
My
to
colleagues,
it.
too.
Okay.
Word on that later. A question.
I hope you're all attending. I'm inviting you.
A lot of room. More the merrier. The tragedy that has befallen the people who were on that ill-fated plane crash, the plane that crashed in France. I know it's not much is known, but as a leader here, as a person who's concerned about airline safety, we now know that one of the pilots locked the door, kept everybody out, the passengers and the other pilot, and apparently deliberately crashed the plane. Do you have any concerns about air safety now, having learned what we're learning from this crash, or general comments on this issue?
It's really hard to address this issue from a policy standpoint when it has such strong personal ramifications, consequences for the families involved. I was thinking this morning, a life is a life, but the fact that they were so young, that those students were so young and there were so many of them on board and there were babies on board, somehow made the tragedy greater. For a long time, many of us have questioned whether there should be something between the passengers and the cockpit. Not just the way it is now, but something more. And we've talked about it and what the expense would be, and is it worth it, or is it just something that isn't necessary but may make you feel better but really isn't going to make a difference. What's sad about this is, even if we had a gate that you had to go through and all the rest, would not have prevented this as far as we know. I don't know what the certainty is of the announcements that have been made. I hope and pray that they would not be true, that this would be a deliberate act, because that makes it even more of a tragedy, although it doesn't bring anybody back if it's not so much of a tragedy. But I do think it does bring up the subject again. This is highly unusual, if this is in fact true, that it would be the pilot. But on the other hand, it also speaks to the vulnerability of the cockpit, or the how important the security of the cockpit is. If there were such a barrier between passengers and the galley and the cockpit, however they would do it. I mean, they're better and more strategic minds in terms of safety of the cockpit. But I do think that that deserves attention again. It would not have prevented this because if, in fact, that is the case. But it is, it just comes back to, for us in the season of Lent, a sorrowful time anyway, just the only response is a tearful one to what happened, and you just thank God. But when people think about what their exposure is getting on the plane, anything can happen. You don't think it's going to be happening at the hands of the pilot. I hope that's not the case. But whatever the case is, our thoughts and prayers are with the families, with the school children who went to school with the young people who were returning from that trip from Barcelona. Imagine the excitement for a trip to go to Spain and then return, having enjoyed that experience, and have it end this way. It's just, you know, as a parent, I just can't even identify with the grief that those parents must have, or the grandparent of children that age.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Oh, have a happy Easter, Passover, whatever you're observing, and see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Same to you.
Same to you.
You didn't ask me what I wanted for my birthday. What did you get? Yeah.
Not the Giants again.
And
We have every other year plan, but we might accelerate
Thank goodness.
that. 10, 12, 14, but I still want my pool tape. I still have the pool tape.
That's a long time wish.
I know, and it's not just the pool table. It's the question of where do you put the pool table? So that is the ongoing debate. I think the dining room is a perfect place. Thank you all.
Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah.